Levels is something where, again, it's just like above here, and you can kind of tell all of the values of all the colors here. If we were to find, let's see if I can find a proper photo that actually the levels would be good on. It is an accurate way to adjust some of your photos. So let's use this one again. This is very similar to exposure. And if you look at our graph up here, you'll notice that we've got a huge leaning towards the blacks. Okay, so the left side is all the blacks, and you can remind yourself of this by looking at the levels and seeing that there's a black over here, there's a gray in the middle, and a white on the right. Let's go ahead and check this levels box so that we can look at our graph here, and you'll see that we're way leaning towards the black side, which makes sense. It's a darker photo, it's underexposed, and it needs more light. There's too many darks. Even our blues here on his sweatshirt and all of these tones should be somewhere in the mid-range, but they're leaning more towards black, and you can't really see the color value there. So one way we could do this is if we just take this white here and we just drag him over. And now that's not going to be a huge difference, but there are no white values here, so we definitely haven't overexposed anything. So you can really adjust these whites and bring them over, and that's going to brighten that photo just a little bit. What you could also do is bring this gray to the middle, and that's going to change all those mid-tones and get those to be a little bit brighter. And all of a sudden, this photo looks way better than it did before, back when we had it down to this dark level. Okay, and notice to show my adjustments, I've got this box checked. If I want to take those adjustments off and show it without, I uncheck that box. It maintains the adjustments I've made to both the white and the gray here, but I can turn them on and off, which is kind of nice. Now, for the time being, when you're just starting out, I think it's better to just use your exposure dial here to adjust your photo. There are some great reasons to use the levels, and I did want you to know what this is, just so it's just so you have a better overview of the entire program. But for right now, I don't think you should worry about it too much. And what you can even do is, if you leave that unchecked, just go ahead and use that caret to minimize that little window. And for this photo, again, if we just use this exposure adjustment, it's going to give us the same effect there. And even if you look at his t-shirt and his sweatshirt here, you can see that those values look pretty good for having been taken with the wrong exposure. So we're skipping levels now. We're going on to highlights and shadows. And highlights and shadows is one that can be extremely effective and very helpful when you've got some photos where you've got some parts where it is exposed well and some parts that it's not. Let's look at this one as a good example here. First of all, let's just take a look at the overall photo. And what we can tell is, look at Davis here. He's definitely too dark, and he's not in focus either, but we're just going to look at the exposure here, and we can notice that he's definitely a little bit too dark. If it was perfect, he'd be a little bit brighter. And for that matter, I'd even think Norm and Carol here could be a little bit brighter. But we've got a lot of other things going on here, and if you look at the windshield, that's definitely not bright, or it's definitely too bright. You know, we'd like that to be a little bit darker. And so we're dealing with this wide range of exposures here. So if I was wanting to get Davis exposed properly, and I move this exposure dial up and brighten him up, notice how we've completely blown out everything here in the windshield. We can't see anything there anymore. I think Norm and Carol actually look much better. Here we can see them a little bit better, and they seem to be exposed just about right. But at this point, we can't see anything out the window. And that would be fine. You know, it's your stylistic choice to do whatever you want to do as far as blowing some parts out or keeping some parts darker. But for the example of using highlights and shadows, this will be perfect. So I'm going to just adjust our exposure back down to 0. And now highlights are these spots right here. They're really bright ones. So you can always think of highlights as the lights where they're really high. Any of the white spots or any time where it's overexposed and it's too bright. The shadows are the complete opposite, are these places, the dark places, all these shadows that are cast on Davis and even on Carol here. So what these adjustments do are bring back those highlights and lighten up those shadows without adjusting the rest of the photo. So whereas if we were doing exposure and I lighten it all up, it lightens the entire photo up. And with these two, I can choose to just bring back these highlights. So if I move this bar, look at the out the front window there, and you notice that it gets much darker, and it brings that back without adjusting Davis or Norm or Carol here. On the opposite hand here, if I change my shadows and I move this dial, it's going to affect Davis, and it's going to affect Carol, and it's going to affect Norm, and it's not going to affect out the window here. So all of a sudden now, if we see the before and after by checking and unchecking the box here, you can see that once again we're way overexposed through the window, way overexposed on the outside, and by using these highlights and shadows, all of a sudden now everyone's a little bit closer to a perfect exposure, and the outside can be seen and it's a little bit darker, and the indoors can also be seen and it's a little bit brighter. Now, one giant caveat to all of this is that this photo kind of looks fake now, and if you look at it, especially with the loop, I'll get that by pressing tilde, you can see there's a lot of noise here. There's a lot of weird reds that are coming out, and look at this blue. This blue's got all kinds of little reds and purples and greens poking through, and even if you look at her face here, we've got all these different pixelated parts, and it's just not made. Look at this black here on the TV. That should be a pure black color, and it's not. We've got all of these colors in here. And the reason for that is I've really cranked up these highlights and shadows over here. I put the shadows all the way over and the highlights pretty close all the way over. This is not something that's to be used to this degree. This should only be used kind of just a little bit to bring it back just a touch. And you don't want to go extreme like that, or it is going to ruin the quality of the photo, and it just doesn't look very natural. So hopefully in the photo you're adjusting, you've gotten it a little bit closer to the actual exposure than I've gotten here, and you don't have to do such an extreme adjustment to get it back to where you'd like it to be. Sometimes there's just too much of a high dynamic range here, and you just have to deal with that. But a lot of times these are great just for small adjustments, and they can really help changing just the highlights or just the shadows rather than moving the whole exposure. One last one down here, moving down to color. You can adjust separately the colors as well. Again, I'm going to go ahead and say that this one isn't one where we really need to worry about, but I can show you real quick that let's say we choose our yellows, because we do have the yellows here in the jersey and on the towel here and on Dad's hat, even on her sweatshirt. So if you just take out the saturation on those, you can notice that these other colors, the blues and his orange and things like that, have maintained a lot, but this yellow is really, really going down in saturation. So you do have the option to kind of choose the colors and how to adjust each separately. But again, I don't think this is something that we really need to worry about right now, so it's good to know what that does, but I would also say that you don't really need to worry about using it at all. It shouldn't really be something you need to work on right now. Okay, so we're going to move past that and do one more thing with this tutorial, and that will be rating the photos. So I'm going to press V to change my view again, and I'm going to go down to the bottom right to make my thumbnails larger. And one of the things we like to do in Aperture is rank our photos in order to choose which ones we actually want to publish online, or we know whatever it is you're going to do with your photos, you need a little rating system in order to choose and mark the ones that you want to keep. So let's start with the Jello shots here. I really like this photo, or at least know that they will. So I'm going to rate this photo. I'm going to go ahead and do 3 stars, okay? Now, you'll notice when I press the 3 on the bottom left-hand corner, these stars show up. So if I press 0, it goes back to 0. I press 3, and then it pops up, and there's my 3 stars. I click my view, and you can see my 3 stars in the bottom left corner here. And what we're doing here is we're rating the photos that we like best, and then we'll keep the 3 stars. And it's just a way that we can mark all of them. So if I say, okay, I like my dentist photo, I like that one, I like this one, and you can go through. If there's some that you wanna that you're not sure about, you can give them a 2. If there's some you really like, you can give them a 5. This is something that you can kind of make up your own little ranking system, so you know which ones you're going to use for, say, Flickr or Facebook or anything like that. But it is a way to rank all of your photos. Okay, I think that is it for now. We'll go on more about using smart folders and exporting photos in the next one.